and then you transitioned into rowing, another event. I mean, crazy, Rachel, absolutely crazy. But was this because of the injury? Was this just because a choice? Because it's very unusual changing into a different sort of event. I mean, what was the thought process there?
Lots of reasons to some extent. I think a number of things came into play. I'd always known about rowing and I'd always had an interest. I'd always wanted to row. I don't know why, always had done. And I knew one of the girls who got gold in my category, Helene. And so I'd always been aware of what she was doing in that sport. She had left. They needed somebody in my category. And I guess I wasn't particularly happy in cycling. Lots of things have changed. Lots of people have changed. Kind of coaching structure had changed a lot, and yeah, it just wasn't the place I wanted to be. I wasn't particularly happy in that sense, and I think a lot of people have sort of seen in the media about things that have come out of sport about places not being great and certain people not being brilliant in a squad, like coaches and managers, and British Cycling got. That was part of one of my reasons for leaving, really, was the centralised. I didn't like the way that my fellow teammates were being treated, and when I was around it, I was really aware, and I perhaps more aware of it in a sense when I went in, because I wasn't there very often. So when I was there, the way people were spoken to, the way people were treated, to me, perhaps stuck out even more because I wasn't used to it. And it made me feel so uncomfortable, and it was wrong, and I knew it was wrong on so many levels. And so I guess, that had a big part. Once I knew rowing were looking for somebody, it sort of all tied in. I didn't have the rehab that I needed for my shoulder, so I knew that it wasn't going to it wasn't working for me, and my shoulder wasn't going to get any better where it was either. So lots of reasons, again, that all of these things kind of happened, and they all kind of ended up linking together to make that decision in the end, which definitely was the right decision for me ultimately as well.
So obviously we talk about, obviously the big championships, and you went straight to Amsterdam in 2014, obviously competing in rowing sort of for the first time. Could you give us a little bit of an indication how that experience was?
That was so surreal, I think. Going into another sport, and when you think UK sport runs all of the sports, or it's under a banner, I think for me, I had presumed that it would be very similar to walking into cycling in the sense of the structure, and how it would work, and it wasn't at all. So I found that initially the first 6 months was about adapting to being a different athlete. It's really interesting because different sports have different ways of thinking about things, and it's something I hadn't really realised in quite how extreme that was. Loads of things that kind of became really interesting about that transition. Learned a lot about how long it actually takes to change your body. So from a hand cyclist point of view, I was using biceps, triceps, but I was using pecs, so the front muscles, a lot for the power. And in rowing, they're just like non-existent. Like, you don't need them really. You do a bit, but nothing like that. And so I had to build my back up. I had to learn how to use different muscles in my back across my shoulders differently. It was absolutely amazing and surreal, I guess. And also, it taught me so much. Again, it was another journey. I think another part of being an athlete, it taught me so much about myself in a very different way. It's almost like each sport I've done has a different part of your character, and that it's then sort of being put together inside me in different sports or through different sports. And it's a bizarre analogy, but that's kind of how it's felt to me along the way. But going into it, yeah, it just felt very strange. Going in having got, a gold and a bronze Paralympic medals in a sport, and then walking in the doors of a sport that you knew you couldn't even do, and saying, "Yeah, I want to get a gold medal." Like, that's really stupid, isn't it? If and I'd gone into Guildford Rowing Club, which is my local one, and they were absolutely and always and have been phenomenal at helping me from that moment when I first walked into their clubhouse, and they were saying, "Oh, do you want to try it?" Not having a clue about what I was doing or what I'd done either, and it was just really interesting that first stage of saying, I want to get a gold medal at the Paralympics. And one of the guys, Rob, who was a massive part of my journey through until I could get into GB level, he just looked at me, and he still remembers it. He always laughs at me for it as well, but he just looked at me as though I really was a complete Fruit Loop, and he's like, it doesn't work quite like that. And I was like, okay, well, we're going to change it then, aren't we? And he totally bought into it from that moment, as coaching and getting me to that level. And him and Ella, another coach, were absolutely phenomenal at getting to that point. And go back to the disability stuff and a bit, I think one of the things that I loved from rowing was very, very open. They didn't have a lot of members with a disability. They had a club, kind of an edge to it, where they would run a session for people with disabilities, but it wasn't part of the main club. And one of my big things is about creating clubs where disability doesn't have to be at the time when nobody else wants to train. Actually, it should be being part of the club, because I'm still a person and I want to train like I trained when I was able-bodied. It doesn't make any difference to me. If I've got the equipment to adapt it, then why do I need to train on a day which I can't train on because I'm working, but then because you're disabled they expect you not to work? And so there's a lot of things like that still happening. And it took a bit of getting through the doors with some members, but the senior women and juniors particularly were incredible, and the women's team there were just brilliant about me being part of the club and just coming along and rocking up to their sessions and jumping on an ergo and training with them. I just bring my seat, which clamped on, and then I can use any Concept 2 rower. So that was fantastic, and I think that was one of the big things also that's had a big impact on me going forwards, about how to get and help people get into sport who want to with a disability, whether that's a hidden disability or a visible one. Physical learning, I work with a lot of people in a lot of clubs now to try and help them to get to the point where they don't have the differences, and you don't have to go at a separate time, and you're only allowed to come to the club at 10 o'clock on a Friday morning. That's not what a club and that committee, that sort of community is about, in my opinion. So that's part of probably one of the reasons for getting involved in a few more sports since, is that changing that grassroots level so that people are part of something they want to be part of and are not sitting at home. I guess, again, one of the things that I've taken out of lockdown has been that the amount of people, wheelchair users, again, physical learning difficulties, so many people with challenges are at home. They don't have the kit to train. Even, they can't just buy a rowing machine online because they need to have the adapted kit, and you can't just buy that. So, and if you don't know how to do it, or you don't know it even there, why would you buy it? Because you wouldn't. And it's thrown up so many people that actually haven't necessarily done sport before, but have got an impairment of some sort, but actually don't know how to do it because nobody tells you how to do it. Nobody tells you how to get the adaptive kit. Nobody tells you how that happens. And so that's been something I've had a lot of sort of questions over, and a lot of parents getting in touch. We've got amazing setup with Joe Wicks doing PE on us, in the mornings, but actually it's not inclusive in lots of ways. I can adapt anything. That's fine for me. I can. but that's because I know what I can do and I know how to train. So, I just before lockdown, there was a comic, it was a sport relief, and I'd gone into a school, and there was a child there who had recently started using a wheelchair, and the school were really nervy about what to do with her. And I hadn't been told that she was there, which was a bit of a shame. But when I turned up and she was there, and there was another girl that was sprained her ankle, and they were sitting out at the back, and I'm like, what are they doing over there? Can we get them in? And she was like, well, I don't really know how to do it. I was like, right, don't worry, it was fine. We'll do it. It's fine. We'll make it work. And both of them got involved. One in a chair, one sat on a chair, and they were so part of it. The PE teacher became much more relaxed. The whole school that were doing the exercises with Joe Ricks leading it were, that's really great. And they're talking to the girls who were kind of getting left out. And it just shows it doesn't take a lot, but it does take a bit of knowledge, and it does take a little bit of confidence to be able to go and do that and deliver those things. So, hopefully longer term, I'd, love to be able to start putting those things together so that there's, how many thousands of children across the country who are wheelchair users who aren't doing sport because they don't have anything at home, or they don't have a bike because the handbikes cost, £3,000-4,000, and yet you can go and buy the equivalent for a child, £60-70 at Halfords, but because they can't ride one of those, where you get that, there's so many people who are sadly overweight and or really unhealthy, and unfit and unable to manage themselves a lot of the time and need extra help because they just don't have the strength, but they don't have the knowledge on how to change it.
And that's, I think, there's some incredible messages there, Rachel, and I think it's so important as well, inclusivity. It's massive, especially, you're not putting it in a hierarchy level, but with children as well, it's absolutely massive. And to be pushed out, not even in an obvious way, but just in a way because people don't know how to, adapt maybe certain exercises. And we've seen during this lockdown, how important exercise is for people's mental state. Rachel, the only reason I've been, I do exercise, but the only reason from a personal point of view, I've been doing it 5-6 times a week is because I want to be able to get up, and if I do exercise, I don't feel as bad about being locked down So what has your experience been like just on an individual level during lockdown? Have you been able to train at all then, or do any sort of exercises?
So I've trained really, I have to say it's been a really good training block for me, which sounds a bit bizarre in lots of ways. I've been, I live with my parents at the moment, and my parents, my dad particularly, is on that government 1.5 million that was sent a letter told to Shield. And so we haven't been going out beyond the end of the drive. So it's 11 weeks ago I went out normally. And I've stayed here because it's not very easy just to go and rent somewhere as a wheelchair user. It's just not quite as easy. And so I'm here and it's set up. So I'm sort of having to obviously be really careful for them. And so, I've shielded with them, and it's been really hard not having contact with people. Conversations like this are great, and speaking to people on Zoom and whatever platforms there are great, but it's not the same as seeing that person. There's so much that you don't get from a flat picture that when you see somebody in 3D, so to speak, you get. It's really interesting, very, very different. But I've done a lot of things alongside, so studying in some courses that I've really wanted to do alongside that I would never get a chance to do normally. And so really build up my profile on the mental health side of things and being able to work with people one-to-one. I'm sort of building a number of people who I'm working with, so a couple of adults and a number of young people, again, who are in different places because of this sort of pandemic and struggling. So then that's just happened by word of mouth. So that's been great. And that's something that I would love to do as full time once I left sport. So getting the opportunity to start building that now is really exciting. So again, it's those negatives into positives kind of sort of thought really that actually everyone is having days when they really struggle. And particularly at the beginning, I think people were really noticing suddenly they'd have a day when they were really teary and just couldn't cope. And again, it's about normalizing some of those things and going, actually, everyone is in this weird state, whether we've got a job or not at the moment. Everything is very, very strange. And having those days, that's normal. That's part of being in this artificial world of lockdown that we're in at the moment. And having, not having that contact with people, not being able to give somebody a hug, not being able to see a member of your family. So all those sort of things, they've made things really, really hard for people. And sport and that creating that natural release of, the endorphins, getting people to feel better, moving your body just makes you feel better, rather than just sitting all day in one position. So I think it's sport has been crucial for so many people, and people that didn't realise it before have now found that it really helps them. So I hope that that's a really good and a big positive going forwards for people, that they can carry that on, but also that they'll be able to find new ways to channel that energy, because they'll be able to use group, they'll be able to go back to doing things outside. So hopefully some of what I do will pick up outside of the artificial world we're in at the moment. And then I think for me, training wise, I've got an upmarket shed, so we say it's a shed, a gym shed now, and it's got a handbike bike in it on a turbo, although it's a handbike bike since 2012 to be fair, and it is just about hanging on to life. It's done a number of thousand miles, and it's really quite tired. So anybody wants to sponsor a handbike, let me know. But I've also got a ski machine, so a Nordic machine. So I'm on a Nordic ski program at the moment as well, which is a bit weird. But anyway, and so I'm doing a lot of Nordic training, and I've also got a kayak paddle machine in the garden. So I'm basically doing triathlons around the garden at the moment, going from one piece of kit to another. And then I've got a chocolate Labrador called Whisper, and who's absolutely conked out on the bed, fast asleep, snoring over there. And she hates my paddle machine, absolutely hates it. So if I get on it and I'm in the garden and she comes out, she just stands at the end of it and howls, proper howls. And then you can hear my mum coming from somewhere going, "Whisper, what are you doing? What are you doing?" So I've ended up with some pretty interesting training and some odd 5 o'clock in the morning type escapes, so that Whisper and I can go for a run occasionally and manage to get out and then get back again before anyone else is up.
Those, once again, some really nice messages there, Rachel, and definitely food for thought, I think, 100%. And getting back to I think we're at 2014. So 2015, Rachel Morris wins the silver in France, which means that she qualifies for the Rio Paralympic Games. Now, tell us all about Rio. Once again, you've had 3 massively different sort of, areas of the world, obviously in Beijing, the UK, and now Rio in Brazil. So what was the camaraderie like? Where was your head at going into this? Just give us a little bit of an indication on that, Rachel.
So the French qualifying in 2014, that was Aiguillette, wasn't it? Was the most amazing race. I don't think I'd really thought that I could do it. I was looking at the start line of people that I've raced in hand cycling as well. It was really bizarre, and there's obviously it's a fairly small pool of athletes in parasport anyway, and then even smaller the amount in your own category, and so you do tend to overlap with people if they're sort of people that move around sport as well. I think that hitting that was one of the best moments actually, and I could still feel that moment of realising that I'd qualified to get to Rio as a rower, and then the next sort of the ultimate thing I had to do really for them in sense of targets and achievement was that I needed to get into the A final. So in rowing you have an A and a B final, so you race and then the tops out of the out of the semis, the top boats go through into either A or B finals, and I knew I had to get to the A finals basically in Rio, and then that would help secure the funding for the next program and various other things, as well as my own. And it was really interesting. It was a very, very different team, very, very different team cycling, partly because of who was leading, like sort of coaching wise, just very different people. I think partly the nature of the sport, actually, the way that stereotypically a lot of athletes come through from, I guess, kind of a lot of athletes are from private school system in rowing, and although that's starting to change and there's some really amazing Thames projects going on now and clubs where state schools and children who are really struggling and challenged for lots of different reasons are getting in boats, so they get to experience that camaraderie, they get to experience that team feeling, and rowing's got something special there. And I think for me it worked brilliantly because I was in a single boat, and my category is only in a single boat, so that's fine. But I was, so a single athlete in the sense that I was out on my own in a boat. Yeah, I was part of a team and a strong team of boats, and in the 4 and the 8s. So paras only have 4, and then you get the 8s in the Olympics. But within the 4, there were a lot of challenges, but actually, again, that taught me a lot. Work with people differently, a lot about how to perhaps change things within the group if things weren't working, using different dynamics, learning how. I think that's probably where my interest even more came into the psychology side of things, in the sort of learning how to work with people in a different way when they couldn't change, maybe they couldn't see something, but actually how you work with them could help them to change or could help them to be better version of themselves, I guess. So as an athlete, I think the thing I pretty much get up and say every day is, when I get out of bed, is I want to do the best that I can do today. I want to be the best version of myself today, so that every day, whether that's through training, whether it's through work, whether it's through learning how to support somebody in a slightly better way, but I want to be able to do that in a slightly better way than I did it yesterday. And I think that growth mindset type, rather than being a fixed mindset, has been probably what's allowed me to develop and to change sports. And I think one of the biggest things that I try and do, working with people and in schools normally, is to try and get people to see that they can choose to have a growth mindset as well. You can choose. It's not that you're pre-programmed to just one or the other, and it's really important to learn how to do that and have those skills. And ultimately, if you choose not to, that's fine. That is your choice. But if you don't know how to do it, then you can't be expected to do it. So trying to give people the tools that enable them to be able to change if they want to, and to be able to learn things, to be able to work with people in a better way, all those sort of things, I think that's for me is a crucial part of it.
So then the single sculls in Rio, gold again, which from what you were saying earlier was your perfect race, the perfect event, the perfect time. All this adversity that we've spoken about numerous times in the past, you have this perfect race in Rio. What is the feeling like? This has got to be complete. You must have also thought, Rachel, my body is superhuman.
Yeah, you can laugh at this one. If I showed you the scan of my shoulders before the race, I think you'd think it wasn't. But yeah, I do get where you're coming from, kind of, in that. I get what you're saying. It is interesting, isn't it? How, I don't know, one of the big things that's definitely come out of it is that the Paralympic athletes seem labelled as superhuman, and it's not that at all. It is training in the same way that the Olympic guys train. It's learning in the same way, but at the same time having to get your body to do it in a different way, I think, is the thing that's different. I guess I always see that, in a sense, my body starts from being injured. So if you look at an able-bodied athlete, and if I'd had my legs still actually, your body is meant to work with 2 arms, 2 legs, and it's meant to work all in balance. So if you then become an amputee or a spinal injuries or something's happened, you've got CP, cerebral palsy or something, so your body is not working as it's designed to, you are more likely to get injuries or to have a weaker area in you, because I'm not able to use very much from kind of the sort of bottom of my heart, where you put your heart rate monitor straps, so sort of around the bottom of your bra level. My body doesn't really work from below that point. So everything that I do is full of creating balance in one side or locking somewhere so that I'm fixed to be able to pull against it. So in rowing, I've got a strap at that level from where I can feel properly, so the bra strap level down, I'm strapped within solid strapping system so that I can pull, and so I artificially, in a sense, create what I haven't got. So all the other rowers, rowing with legs and all the different muscles that are designed and their core. And if you think about how much a rower has to train their core, legs, all the rest of it to be so strong, and I don't have that, yet my arms are as strong and stronger, actually, than they would be if I had legs. So my body's working in a very different sort of wrong way, really. So I've got the strap from there, and all of my rowing is literally leaned on that strap. Number of stress fractures in my ribs, for example, over training as a rower, because the power that I was able to put through that strap. And so I think a lot of para athletes, in a sense, start from an injured point of their body because you're just not using your body in a normal way. That's all it is. But I guess it means that you have to just be a bit more careful, really, with your body in the sense of how you look after it. But I also think a lot of Olympic athletes should be perhaps a bit more careful and just realise the long-term effects. And that's sports in general. They need to understand that actually, once they finish with an athlete and once an athlete's finished with sport competitively, that they have to go on and live afterwards. And they want to be able to go and live a healthy life after leaving elite sport, not go out and be a broken athlete, physically, mentally. That's not what we should be doing with athletes. And so I ended up, before Rio, I damaged my shoulders anyway from 2012, and it hadn't been properly looked after then. And then it was perhaps slightly not particularly well managed when I was rowing at a certain point using weights, and I ended up with some massive tears in my shoulder, and really excruciatingly painful shoulders. So I'd had those injected with steroids a number of times, and basically that masks the pain, stops it hurting, and so you can carry on, and all you're doing then is damaging your body and not realising it. So I'm not convinced that's the right way really for athletes, particularly going forwards, that we should be doing with them. But it's what happened at the time, and I went into Rio, but came out of Rio. So that, I say, the last scan I'd got literally had a thread holding my shoulder together on this side, and the surgeon said that the chances were I wasn't going to get to Rio, and my argument was I'd got that far. I was 3 months out from Rio. I was going to do everything I could to be on that start line. So I changed some of the way I trained with the weights and things, and just went all out to try and protect my shoulders by getting them stronger, but by being as careful as I could at the same time. Ended up, that I knew that there was a chance that I wouldn't get to Rio at that point, and that was a hard thing to come to terms with. But I decided, along with the coaching, that I'd invested, 3 years, just over 3 years at that point, and didn't really want to walk away from it because I might get to Rio. And obviously for me, that gamble paid off on that part of it. I got to Rio and had the most incredible time, for lots and lots of reasons, and came away with a gold medal. And obviously that's two sports as well, which is slightly different, and it just makes things stand out a bit, makes you perhaps realise some of what you do is quite cool.
So gold medal in Beijing, and then obviously so much has happened in between. Then gold medal obviously in 2016. which did you feel was the best moment out of those two, and why?
The gold medal in Rio was the most amazing feeling for so many reasons, because I was part of a big team that cared. That was part of it. And being part of a team, my dad wasn't well enough to go out, but my sister and my mum and I had some friends and some relatives who live in Australia came round the other way and met us in Rio, and came out to watch, and that was incredible. So I think having changed sports, people realising, particularly my family, that that's kind of unusual. They don't really get what I do at all. And they just don't understand me. They're not sporty. So I'm not quite sure. It's quite a standard joke. I'm not knowing quite what or where I came from, because none of them have got sports in them at all.
Wow.
And my mum loves walking, absolutely loves being outside and things, but just not sports. Like games, I don't think. I mean, she genuinely hasn't ever played a game of netball or lacrosse since the day she left school. So they don't. None of them run. None of them do anything. It's really interesting. Really interesting. Yeah.
So 2018, post Rio, once again, we transitioned into another sport, and it was this time it was skiing. You turned your attention to skiing. First trying a sit ski in March 2018. So what was the thought process going into that, Rachel? Obviously, I know you went through a lot of issues with both. Well, your shoulder operations. Was that a conscious effort to move into something that was maybe less strenuous on your shoulders, or was it just a conscious decision that you wanted to move into another event?
My shoulders journey after Rio was quite something, and ended up, and having your shoulders operated on basically as a wheelchair user is never going to be a good outcome for a few months, because you can't do very much. I use my arms to lift in and out of bed. I use my arms to lift in and out of the car. I have to lift to do everything. And as soon as you take one arm out, you can't lift, especially without legs. I've not got any other way of pivoting off myself. So I ended up, it was meant to be 3 months in hospital to have both my shoulders done and rebuilt and be back home and then start rehabbing. But it ended up being a nightmare. And the right one was incredible and worked brilliantly. Had the left one done, and at that point I had 4 weeks then when I couldn't use either arm. Both were in slings, and so I just couldn't do anything, and that was hard going. Well, hard isn't even the word for it. That was probably one of the most testing times mentally, in the sense of not being able to do sport. And I think for me, just shows me how important sport is for people at the moment. So when I was in hospital, I'd gone in knowing that I was staying in for a block of time, but I guess the lockdown has sort of done the same thing, in the sense of taking sport away from people, or people not being able to just run and do things in the same way they would do normally. Their coping strategies have been taken away, and that was what happened for me. My coping strategies were taken away, really, when I had my shoulders operated on. And I guess that's why I realised perhaps how hard it is for some people out there without their normal coping strategies to be able to use. It was awful. And then I had the left one done, and it went wrong. It ruptured after the surgery about 3 weeks in. So then I had another surgery done 6 weeks after that. That failed, and then I had to have open shoulder surgery and have it all put back together. And it was nightmare. But I also would have to say the local hospital where I was at, Frimley Park, which is my local one, them and the team that I was under when I was there, they were absolutely phenomenal. Incredible group of staff. So they were probably my lifeline then. That was hard, and there were some really dark days there. That was not a good place to be. People telling me that I wouldn't get my independence back again, that after that shoulder surgery had failed, that I would never be able to manage independently, that I'd need an electric chair, that I wouldn't be able to do this, I wouldn't be able to do that. And when people suddenly start saying that you're going to have to live your life completely differently again, then I wasn't good at that. That was something I wasn't good at. So I'd started learning to push my chair one-armed, and I'd escape from the hospital and go for a run around the local roads and push one-armed. So I'd be pushing just one with the other one in a sling,
Wow.
and I literally would zigzag up and down the pavement like that because you couldn't go in a straight line. I learned to jump on off curbs one-armed. So you see, you get... I've got some great skills now that I don't need, but at the time were amazing out of a really bad situation. But I had planned on going back to rowing, and unfortunately that didn't happen for lots of reasons from the rowing program side. And still gutted that I've not gone back and that I haven't been able to go back. I had done that surgery with the aim to go to Tokyo as a rower, and that obviously has gone out the window now. But yes, I am a Nordic skier at the moment, and I tried downhill, and that was fantastic. Enjoyed it, but there's not the physiological challenge that there is in Nordic. Nordic is basically cross country running, but on skis, and absolutely brutal and fantastic at the same time. Plus you get to do biathlon, so you're shooting and skiing. Happy days. It's brilliant. It really suits me, this sport. I love it. And then I'm doing a lot of kayaking alongside that, which really, they both complement each other really well.
What's your, I guess, two questions, out of the sports that you've taken part in and competed obviously at a very high level, what is the toughest and what is your most favourite out of all of them?
Yeah, it's funny. So I love my bike because I just love riding my bike. And I love the fact that I can just ride anywhere like anybody can on two wheels. I love that feeling. Rowing is probably the hardest training I've done. Rowing is definitely the hardest training I've done in that sense. And I love that training that way suits me brilliantly. So I love that. Love rowing, really, really love rowing. But I guess, physiologically, from that point of view, I love it, rowing the best in that sense, from able to push yourself. But I love the Nordic. I just never thought that as a wheelchair user, I could be able to go into the middle of nowhere on my own. So being able to ski 20k from anybody else, literally out into the middle of nowhere in Canada or in Norway and Sweden are my favourite places, but Norway particularly, to go on these tracks and trails and just go and train for hours on end on your own and not see anyone else, and be that remote is just fantastic. I love that feeling. And also it's like running on sand all the time. It's such hard work. And so for me, it's kind of the best of both worlds. Kind of get that really hard work, but also just being so remote, and it's just incredible. And I guess getting back to kayaking, although it's going the wrong way compared to rowing, although everyone else tells me I'm going the right way now, but that's a standard piece of whatever joke between kayakers and rowing. I'm always going the wrong way for somebody, but getting back on the water has also been really important for me. I really missed that, and I do row still from the club at Guildford as well. So they all do different things for me, and I think that goes back and links back to the fact that I changed sports because it almost builds or fits a part of me, rather than it being about the sport as such. So,
and so what is, I mean, after all this, I mean, what a career, Rachel! Wow, that this is what a podcast has been. It's been so interesting, and
I just talked to you, poor thing.
No, it's incredible. It's been really. What is Rachel? Obviously, we've got a little bit of an indication of what you're doing now with the mental health side of things and helping children. But what is Rachel Morris doing right now? What is the journey from now onwards?
So, a few things, I think. Definitely ties into the mental health side of things. I've experienced it, my side of it. I've seen other people really struggle, and now it's being allowed to be talked about. I want to use sport to make a big difference, and I think now, hopefully, people realising as well. You say with this pandemic, people have actually realised sport has a really big place for helping them to feel good, to feel better about themselves. And people don't have to do netball or football. It's not about doing what's offered to you just in at school. It's about finding something for you that works for you, and there's so many sports out there. So one of the things I'm really enjoying doing is working with something that I started after 2012, but on getting children with disabilities or impairments, hidden and visible, to come to a day where they can come and try loads of different sports. So it's a non-competitive sports day as such, but it's about getting them to try, making sure the kit's there, making sure we've got all the different as many sports as possible, local clubs as well. And it's at the moment it's for Surrey children only, but it's about giving them the experience, letting them see that just because they're a wheelchair user, they can go on an abseiling wall. Just because they've got one leg, that they can go and play tennis in a chair, or or on crutches, however they want to do it. It's about adapting things to make it work for them, and I've really enjoyed that as a project. That has been amazing. I guess that also ties in the mental health stuff, because I've had a few parents get in touch with me about children over the years who are going to have an amputation and they've known about it, and one more recently about a year ago, and I did a lot of work with him, and that's taught me so much and given me the most amazing case study to be able to say these things actually work, and if we put them in place, we can really help children adapt and learn who they are, just the same person. I think one of the biggest things I would say to anybody is, whether you've had a disability from birth, whether you've got a hidden disability, whether you've got anxiety that completely overtakes you, and yet everything else, everyone thinks you're, in brackets, normal. All these things, everyone's got a challenge somewhere. Like, everyone has. They might not have experienced it yet, but there will be something that is going to be hard in your life, and it's about teaching people to know that just because they've got something that's a bit different, or they've got a challenge, that doesn't mean they're any less of a person. It's just about finding the right way for them to be able to cope with the situation and giving them those skills to enable them to cope better. And support through sport is going to be my way forwards. I think using that as a big sort of tie into mental health, eating disorders, and all of that sort of stuff, I think. So yeah, it's just starting to come together a bit, and I'm starting to feel that I can do something else and not be just an athlete. Something that's really come out more over the last few years is just how much athletes don't see themselves as anything after they finish sport, and I really felt that because I couldn't do sport anymore after my shoulders initially. I just thought I wasn't anything or anybody anymore, and didn't really know where I was going to go. So I'm doing a course out of Loughborough at the moment on mental health and elite athlete mental health and wellbeing. So about creating programs so that we can enable athletes to feel that, and to understand who they are, and to be able to be ready to leave sport. So everyone's going to retire at some point from being a professional athlete. And so it's about making sure you're ready, know who you are, know your strengths and weaknesses, and that you've identified things that you want to do afterwards, so that you're not just that athlete anymore. You are somebody who's achieved great things, maybe somebody who's been a really steady athlete and done so much over so many years, somebody who's had a really short career, but actually all of those, they're an athlete and they've got amazing skills as athletes, and it's about taking those out to help other people, but to be able to give them a chance to be able to make a really good life for themselves afterwards.